Everyone, and welcome to another MadCap Software product release webinar. Thank you all very much for joining. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening, wherever it is in the world you are. As you know, market-leading innovation is what drives us here at MadCap Software. With major new releases for Flare and Central, we're excited to bring you some new cutting-edge features and enhancements that are designed to streamline your content creation and management. As you know, MadCap Software's vision is to help in bridging silos between technical communications and learning and development content creators. And we're going to start to explore the beginnings of that MadCap Software ecosystem, the first of many integrations between Flare and Syndicate. So we'll be able to see how these platforms complement each other and enhance your content strategies and can help enhance your content strategies. Today we'll be presenting some of those new features recently released for MadCap Central and for Flare, including that ability to publish to Xyleme Syndicate. And basically, you get in a new destination to host, publish, and analyze your content. You can learn to future-proof your content strategy and understand the strategic direction that MadCap Software is taking and how to leverage some of our new tools in place in your organization to keep you at the forefront of content technology. Today's demo will be led by none other than Jennifer Morse, our Vice President Customer Success, who will present us with a comprehensive look at what's in these new releases. And Chris Coker, our Senior Solutions Architect on the Xyleme side of things, and he'll be on hand to explain to us some of what you can do with that content once it's in Xyleme Syndicate. Jennifer has over 20 years of experience in software sales, and she started with MadCap way at the beginning. And as president of customer success, her focus is to promote customer onboarding and promote the value of the company's solutions to the marketplace and solicit your feedback. Get in touch, let us know what we're doing right, and well, if we're doing anything wrong as well. Jennifer earned a Bachelor of Arts in Biological Sciences from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Chris Coker is a word enthusiast, a veteran English teacher and a self-described tech head who lives and breathes technology as much as is obsessed about effective learning. Having spent nearly 2 decades as a professional educator with an intense focus on melding the benefits of the technology with the intricate aspects of learning and development, he's now with the Xyleme team as a senior solutions architect. In his role, he revels in solving complex problems and working alongside other industry-leading minds to help organizations re-envision how enterprise learning can scale and be effective. But before we get into the details of the webinar, let's do a little bit of housekeeping, shall we? Please, thank you. So this webinar will be recorded, and so if you do miss out on anything, you want to hear something again, you will receive an email with a link to the recording shortly after it's over. So you can always come back and watch it again. If you have any questions, feel free to use the Ask Question panel, the question and answer panel. I've just highlighted that in your interface, and so type your question in there. Note, though, that you will only see your own questions in the list, and then we'll be replying to you. If we get to the end of the webinar and we're unable to answer all the questions that you've asked, we'll be sure to include answers to those in the emails that we send out. You've got the media player where you're going to be seeing the demo and where you're watching the presentation at the moment, and that's the main point on there. If you feel like you need a demo or you would like to request a demo, feel free to click the request demo button, and that'll take you onto the MadCap Software website where you can schedule yourself, schedule some time free with one of our experts who will be free and happy to show you all of these new features and more, and answer any other questions that you might have about any of our solutions. You've got a help button on there, so if you're struggling with the On24 interface, feel free to click on the help and you go over onto the On24 help. Without further ado, let's welcome Jennifer and Chris. Take it away, Jen.
Thank you, Dippo. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you all here. I'm so honored that you're spending the time with us today. We're quite excited about these releases that we've just had recently, which we're going to talk about today. I do hope I'm coming through loud and clear, and I hope that you can see my screen. If not, drop a little message in the chat and we'll do our best to help. But hopefully my bandwidth is good here. So quick agenda today. We are going to be talking about the recent releases that we've just had, as Dippo mentioned. So we're going to start with talking about what's been released in Central. We've had a lot of updates since the first of the year. As you know, we just released Flare 2024, so I'm going to be going through some of the main outwardly facing features that you might take advantage of if you're using Flare, and then we'll wrap with a question and answer. So we have a lot to go through. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the updates to Central first. So I'm going to pull up my web browser. I'm going to do my best to move through this as elegantly as possible. Okay, so a big focus in the last few months with Central have been improvements to the authoring process for Central authors, as well as some enhancements for subject matter experts too. So I'm going to start with that first. So here I am in Central. I just have a project open. I'm not going to go through kind of a whole Central overview in terms of what it is and what it does. If you have questions about that, if you're like, gosh, what is this thing? Get in touch with us. We'll certainly go through it. I really want to hone in on and kind of home in on some of the editor improvements that we've had. So one of the things you can do in Central now, if you haven't already noticed, is we can actually see our project files. Of course, we've always been able to see them, but now we can actually edit and author this content in the cloud without actually needing Flare. So it may benefit you if you've got some folks on the team that might not need Flare, but maybe they need to do a little bit more than just wait for content to be reviewed. They might have to get into your source topics a little bit and do some editing. Well, we've expanded some of the capabilities to make it easier to do so. When we come into Central, I just went into one of my projects here. It's called Reduce Flicker because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. There's various things we can do, but what I've done is I've gone right into the files list here, and this represents what I'm seeing in what I would see in my Flare project. These are my content files. So think of this as your Content Explorer. Okay. When we go into a file now, I'll go ahead and select this Getting Started one. It loads in Central's lightweight editor. Now, the editor in Central still renders the content as we see it. It's not going to look and feel like Flare just yet, but it's meant to be a simple, easy, lightweight HTML-based editor here. So if I have the right permissions in Central, if I'm an author in Central, now I don't need Flare to do this. I just have to be an author with the right editing permissions. I can come up here. I've gone right into the source topic. I can edit this. And we had very basic toolbar buttons up until a few months ago, but we've added a few more. So I'm going to kind of run through these a little bit so you can see what's available now in the editor. So most of these are the same. I'm going to actually, this is kind of front and center in the toolbar. I'm going to come back to this in a minute. But as we kind of move over here, real basic editing here, we have access to, some styles here. We have access to these paragraphed and heading and list styles. Those have always been there, but there's some new things we can do. When we're editing, we can actually insert hyperlinks and cross-references. So in my example here, I actually created some external hyperlinks. If I select Windows Guide with PDF here in the example, you can see I actually inserted a link to this external PDF file. And if I select it here, you can see I've chosen to link to an external link. I put in the actual link address here. My text for the link shows up. We can change that, of course, if we want. And then we have some additional link properties. Do we want it to open up, for example, in the parent frame, in a new window, in the same frame? So much of the same link properties that we're used to seeing in Flare when we insert that external link become available to us here in Central. We can also, of course, remove the link or edit it. We can also insert links to do cross-reference links, I should say. So I can link, of course, as we know, cross-references are fantastic when we're linking our reader to another topic or a section of a topic inside a project. Jumps our reader right there. So we have those choices. We can choose to link to a topic. Maybe we want to link to a place in the particular topic that we're on, right? We have access to those things, to those various bookmarks and sections in the document. And of course, like the hyperlink, we have those link properties, right? Do we want it to open in a same window tab? We've got some alternate text available here, a screen tip. So again, much of the same, many of the same features that we have Flare on the desktop for inserting and managing links are available now here in the cloud. Some of the other things you can do now, we can insert, we had the ability to insert an image for some time. We can also insert and edit multimedia files. So for example, if we have a multimedia file in our project, maybe an MP4 from something, whether it's Mimic or Camtasia or Articulate or anything really that creates a little tutorial or an MP4, we can link to it. We can also tell Central here, well, maybe we don't want to link to a compiled file. We might want to link to a YouTube video or a Vimeo video or something else on a streaming service somewhere. So now we can insert links to compiled movie formats that are in our project, or we can link to a movie on like YouTube, for example, and we can specify some heights and some widths here. So that's available now in the interface. Of course, you know, this was released last year, but I would be remiss not to mention this. We've actually integrated Central with ChatGPT. So we call this AI Assist. Now, this isn't something that's turned on by default. You actually have to enable this, but we can actually bring through and we can turn on our instance of ChatGPT and pull it right here into Central. So this might be a wonderful way to analyze content that we've got in our topics, perhaps check for tone or style or voice or certain grammatical, you know, style things that we want to adhere to, serial comma versus not serial comma. Maybe we want to rewrite some text to make sure it matches a you know, a certain reading level, for example, and we can analyze that back in Flare. So there's a lot of capabilities, even though this webinar is not really about AI, but it's kind of all around us. We can't not think about it. So the ability to bring this through into Central has been really fun. And by the way, if you're not using this yet, if you're thinking about it and you're wondering, how do we even do this? There's some great information about how to do it. And your customer success manager here at MadCap, whether it's me or somebody else on our team, get in touch with us. We'd be happy to talk more about how to integrate AI into your workflow. And we've just dipped our toe into this. I suspect some really fun things coming down the pipe with AI in Central and what we're doing on the Flare side. So if you're AI curious, as they say, get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you about it and see what you're interested in, what you'd like to see, and actually help you try this out if you haven't done it yet. So I would be remiss not to mention this really cool things you can do with AI Assist. Other things we can do in the Central editor now, we have the ability to insert a variable. So for example, we have some text here. It says, see the following to get started quickly. What if I wanted to insert a variable here? Well, I can just use it just like we would in Flare. I can insert a variable. Perhaps I want to insert my product name. Now, the variables have to be in the project, so those all start in Flare. That doesn't go away. We do that lift on the Flare side. But if we've synced our project to Central, they become available to us if we're editing the file here in the web. So I'll go ahead and insert it. There's my variable. And if I click in there, I get a little bit of information here about what that is. So at least I can see. And then these tags, as you'll notice, you might be noticing this now if you're already using Central for authoring or in reviews, but they are clickable. So we can actually see, like, well, if I click on that P tag, it's going to select the entire P tag. So before, we did have some information about it, but what's nice now is we can actually, if I click in the table here, you can see these become clickable, and I can select the entire bit here. Maybe I want to delete it or I want to do something to it. That selection is there for you. So moving back to this, I've inserted my variable here. Other things we can do. We can have access to our project snippets. So we can insert a snippet, for example. Perhaps I have one in my project. I'll go ahead and create one here. Now, snippets happen to be one of those things. Oh, of course, we've got that there. Let's try that again. So snippets happen to be one of those things. I think this is a bandwidth thing. I see weird things happen when I'm sharing my screen all of the time. Snippets happen to be one of those files that can be created and managed in Flare and synced to Central, but we can also create snippets here right directly in Central's editor. We don't have to use Flare necessarily. So if we wanted to create a net new snippet file for the team, we can do it right here in addition to topics. Okay, so in addition to those snippets, we also have the ability to insert drop downs. So if I wanted to, I could highlight all this and wrap it in a drop down tag if I wanted to. Okay, so that's available now. We'll probably see more fun editor enhancements to some of this in the future, but we can do this now. Now, the other big thing I want to mention, this is really, this is kind of cool, is if we're working in Central, we can actually apply conditions that are available to us in the project. So that's this button right here. We can apply those conditions. So if the condition was created and synced to Central, they become available to us here, just like we would do in Flare, but we don't actually need Flare to do it. Now you'll notice that this has that visual indicator here that we've actually got a condition tag. That ties into this new button here where we can show or hide conditions that have been applied. So think about this as that show hide conditional indicator button in Flare, where maybe you want that color-coded bar to show up right across an element in your editor. Same kind of idea. If I had an additional condition that I wanted to apply here, maybe try this one more time just to kind of see how it looks. You can see we've got multiple conditions applied. So we've got this visual indicator here. If I turn it off, you can see it goes away. Now I can hover over here and it's still going to let me know. But if I turn these indicators on, at least it gives me a visual representation that there are condition tags there. And that's actually one of the things that's going to carry over into the review editor as well, that might help the reviewers understand a little bit more what's happening with that row of content. Why does it look that way? Well, there happens to be a condition tag on it, and that's why it looks that way. So we can kind of see, in fact, it kind of went away there quickly. You see, if I hover over it, I get some indicators. In fact, I can see here that it's got two tags on it. It's got a tag called online and a tag called PDF. So visually, we can see what's happening. And if we hover, we get a little bit more information that's there. So you can turn those on and off. Okay, so some new editor capabilities. Some of this, as I mentioned, translates over into the review workflow. Most of these things, though, that I've just covered happen to be available for authors only, like inserting cross-references, like those kinds of advanced links. Those are only available to authors. Same thing with inserting conditions and snippets and variables. So most of those things are, but that ability to see or not see conditions translates through to the review workflow. And I think that's quite helpful, actually, to make it a little bit easier to discern what's happening for the reviewer on that screen. In fact, we'll take a look at that. I'll show you real quick. I actually published a topic for review just to save a little bit of time. I'm going to go ahead and just remind you. So I'm actually logged in here as a reviewer. So I've sent some files for review from Flare. I already did it just to save ourselves a minute. And so a couple things to note. If you haven't already seen, one of the things we can do now is when we send files to our SME for review, I happen to find this quite useful. Now I'm logged in as a reviewer now. I'm a fake SME here called TimQuest. So we can see what's happening from the SME point of view. One of the things I really like is as an author, when you send things for review, you can now package up a table of contents view for the SME. I think as technical writers, most, we're sort of already ingrained in that notion of topics, and every topic could be page one, and where it lives in a hierarchy is not as important as the structure of the content itself. Our SMEs, however, might not necessarily see topics that way. They may not even know what a topic is. They may not know what a snippet is. What often we hear is, well, just send me the PDF, send me the Word doc. And they're used to seeing things in some sort of order or structure. So this isn't just released. I mean, this has been out for a little bit, but it's really easy to miss. And so I would be remiss not to remind you all that this is something you can do. To make it a little easier on your SMEs. We can say, okay, I'm going to send chapter 5 for review, or I'm going to send this file for review, but I also want to include a table of contents with it so that my subject matter expert can see these things in context. They know where this particular file that I've asked him to review sits in the overarching hierarchy of things. Now, Tim, we're not going to be able to edit these things because they weren't sent in the package, but I can at least see where it sits in the overarching set of things. Okay, so if I select this, I'll go ahead and load it in the editor here. A couple things I also want to point out that we've included recently. So this is the full topic. Now, when I'm reviewing, all changes are tracked. We don't have to turn any of that on. You can see I've got my show hide conditional markers on. So if I click that, that goes away. If I click it, it comes back on, which is kind of nice. One of the things you'll notice is in this topic, I happen to have snippets inserted into the topic. They came from Flare. We inserted them and we sent it out for review. I chose to include those snippets in the review package. You have that choice. You can see it's made up of 2 snippets, okay? Real world though, sometimes your topics are made up of more than just 1 or 2 snippets, for example, and maybe you want to include them so that your SME can review them. If you don't want them to review them and you just want them visible in line, you can remove them, of course. It's totally up to you. But if you're giving your reviewer editing power here for your snippets, one thing that I really like, it was a little bit tricky for SMEs at times to know, first of all, what is a snippet? And if they look at this snippet, if they click in here, they can't actually edit that information because it's from that snippet file. And they'd have to know to look for that snippet file over here on the left, right? And they'd have to say, oh, it's getting started. I'll select getting started. It was just a little bit tricky. So what we've done here is when an SME clicks on a snippet and they want to review it, if it was in fact included in the package, when you select it, you have some new buttons available. Maybe you want to edit this snippet directly. So I'll go ahead and click on this snippet and it opens it up and pops it into this new little window here. And now I can edit it. I don't have to hunt and peck through a long list of snippet files to try and find it. I get direct, quick access to that snippet. Okay, and I can make some changes. So I'll make that change. Oops, I should spell it correctly. I can never type when anybody's watching. And I'll go ahead and submit it. Okay, so, and it'll refresh here in a moment if I go to look at that snippet. Whoops, excuse me. If we take a look at it here, and of course it made a liar out of me. Well, oh, it's because I clicked on the wrong one. Sorry, there's my change. I clicked on the wrong snippet. So the idea is that we don't have to hunt and peck through if we want to edit that particular snippet file. We can actually get to it right here. So the other thing we could do is we can say, well, I just want to open it. I just want to open it and look at it. So here we go. So we can load it here in the center. I can keep editing it if I want to, and then I can submit my change. Okay. So the point is what I wanted to make, if I could kind of roll it back a little bit, is we're trying to add additional capabilities in the editor to make it a little easier for our SMEs who might not be Flare experts, who might not be content management people. They just want to look at the stuff, start editing that source. We don't have to hunt and peck and find snippets anymore. We can edit them directly in the topic in line if they've been given to us as a review package. Plus, we have the ability now to show and hide conditions, which I think is quite helpful for those SMEs who might not be maybe totally in the know about what some of these single sourcing features are. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to cover on the central side. Additional editing capabilities in that author in the author view, if you are an author in Central, and some additional visibility and editing capabilities as a reviewer, plus the ability to see content in context of an entire table of contents if we want. So we don't have to just look through a random list. We can see it in its hierarchy. Makes it a little bit easier to see the context of things. So that's what I wanted to talk about on the Flare side. Again, let us know if you have more questions and you want to dig into that in a bit more detail. Reach out to us. We'd be happy to schedule a call and run through some of that and train you on some of those new features in Central. Now, in terms of Flare, of course, that was just released in 2024. Let's transition and talk a little bit about the Flare side. Now, there were kind of two sort of smallish things and kind of one big thing that I'm going to talk about today. Well, I think they're all big, but everybody's got a little bit different feeling about it. In Flare 2024, I'm going to start with sort of the two, what I don't want to say little ones, but maybe minor things. But actually, you might kind of enjoy them. They might not be so minor to you. And then we'll talk about the Syndicate part of it, that integration and what that might mean for you. So in Flare 2024, three big things. Let's start with the first one. I'm not going to demo it because I don't have a FrameMaker on my machine, but if any of you are coming from FrameMaker 2022 and you're going to be importing content from FrameMaker, so if I was to come here and import FrameMaker documents, Flare 2024 now supports FrameMaker 2022. So that's the highest version that we support now. We went up a version. So if you're migrating any legacy content off of that platform, you can bring those Frame 2022 docs directly in to Flare. So please make note of that. I'm not going to demo it, but just so you know that capability is there. The next thing I want to talk about, which I think is kind of fun and interesting, is this idea of being able to reduce the flicker when we're looking at HTML5 output. So before I show the mechanics here, I just want to show you kind of the output. So I'm going to switch my screen one more time. I hope this comes through. I was testing this earlier, and sometimes the screen share, there's a little bit of a lag. I think you'll see this better if you try this on your own machine and your own servers rather than added, the bandwidth and the screen share here. But I just want to show you kind of a before and after. I've published two of the same targets with and without this reduce flicker setting, so you can see. So whoops, sorry, I just noticed that everything has just taken over my screen here because of PowerPoint. Forgive me. Oh goodness, I knew I wasn't going to be elegant moving through this here. Sorry. Okay. So if we were to look at this here, this is without that flicker, just standard, we don't have that enabled. So if I were to move through my top level books here, these parent nodes in my table of contents, I want you to pay attention. It's really slight, but if I click image position right, for example, do you see it just flashed for just a second? Again, some people may not notice it. It may not really bother them, but it's just a real quick flash where it loads. I'll just select image within list. I'll do that one more time. So as we select these things, it's loading it real quick. It's just a real quick flash. But if we were to look at the same thing with this option enabled, okay, so this is generated again with that option enabled, and I'll show you where it is. You can see it's going to be incredibly reduced. So if I select image position left, again, I can't tell if you can see that on your end, but it's not gone 100%, but it's incredibly reduced. So I just selected image position right, there was no flicker. If I click thumbnail image here, there's no flicker. So the page is just, you don't get that same like flash experience. So you might care about it, you might not. That's totally up to you. I would encourage you to try it and see if you like it better. Some pros and cons to it though. And by the way, let me show you mechanically where you might choose to turn that on and play with it a little bit. It is a setting in the setup tab of your skin file in Flare. So I went ahead and opened up this, it's a side navigation skin. I just called it reduce flicker. And if you pop into the setup tab of the skin, there is a new checkbox here called embed visible TOC entries. And there's a little info button to tell you kind of what it is. So in other words, when you have this option enabled, those parent TOC items are preloaded in the output. They're actually embedded into the output. So we see a reduction in that flicker when opening the topics. It's going to be less significant. So there's some pros and cons to this. One of the things to think about, I mean, for pro-wise, I think it's kind of an interesting experience for the user. If you feel like that might be an issue for some people, or if it's a UX kind of thing, you don't like it, you might experiment with some of this. I have noticed that it can, just full transparency, and this is actually documented in the online help for this new feature, it can increase build times just by a few minutes. So it's not a long time, but if you're used to like, a 5-second build on something, it might take 10 seconds to build. So it can increase it just a little bit. I don't know if that's really, I don't think it's scalable. So don't start extrapolating seconds here based on your project size, but experiment with it on your own. So, and there's a great table in the online help that talks about some of the pros and cons. So again, in addition to maybe a little bit longer build time, not much, but a little bit, you might see a slight increase in build size too, in terms of your output file. Again, I don't think it is significant, but it's just something to be mindful of, and you'll be able to see that size difference. So again, a little bit longer build time, maybe slightly larger in the output file size, but you might like that might be not a big deal if you like that experience of reducing that flicker in your output. So try it, experiment with it, see if it's something that you like. And that's where we turn it on. Once it's created in the skin, of course, we would tell our target to use this particular skin with that enabled in there. Okay, so not a difficult thing to do, but if you like it, try it out. Let us know what you think. Curious to see if anybody's using that currently. But that's something that we've been hearing about for some time. People wanted to reduce that, so it's something that we wanted to add as a feature for folks. All right, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is kind of the big thing that we released, which is this fun experience of publishing our content to Xyleme Syndicate. Okay, so if you're not aware, earlier in the year, MadCap announced its acquisition of Xyleme, which was really, really exciting, a very strategic acquisition for us, which has been really, really fun for all of us on the MadCap side. So Xyleme, if you're not aware, they've been a leader in the enterprise content management space, more so in the learning and development world. One of the products in their offering is called Syndicate, and it does a lot of things. It does a lot of really cool things. And Chris and I are going to talk about some of the fun things that might be really pertinent to you all in the tech comm side of the house. But in a nutshell, what this Syndicate is, it's a content warehouse. Okay, think about it like that. And it stores and manages your published goods and then delivers or syndicates your published goods. It's kind of where the name comes from. And then it can report back on things in terms of consumption of those published goods. You can control access to those published goods. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. And at first, as you're listening to it, it might sound a little bit like Central. However, it's not going to replace what you're doing in Flare and Central, but it's going to complement what you're doing. And depending on your needs, Syndicate may be something that can help extend the reach of your technical content to other parts of your organization, or maybe other ecosystems altogether. So traditionally, Xyleme's really had this, has really been a main player in the learning and development space. There's a lot of overlap, and it's also going to help the world of technical communication as well as we start thinking about breaking down the silos of content. So it's really exciting what's possible. And the way it does this is through a few things. I'm going to talk about some of these things. The mechanics of getting our Flare content over to Syndicate are pretty easy. There's not a lot there. So I want to talk a little bit about, well, why would you think about this? Why should we even care about getting content over there? And then I'll show you the one little mechanical bit to actually get it over there. The good news is for the Flare people, it's a one-click publish. It's just an extra destination, and it's pretty simple, which is great. But once it's in Syndicate, boy, the world really opens up and some really cool things are possible. So why should we think about it? Why do we care? So you can publish there. Well, let's talk about it a little bit. We'll dig in. Chris is gonna, we're gonna transition. We'll show you Syndicate 2. And he'll talk a little bit about this and add some extra color and fill some stuff in here. But what Syndicate is, again, it's a cloud-based content delivery platform that happens to have a CDN built into it, and it's there to support multi-file or single-file documents, technical communication, e-learning material, other content such as PowerPoints, PDF, articulate courses, etc. So think about it as a warehouse to blend in all of your content, your output. Okay, that's a big thing that the platform does. There's some really amazing advanced search across the content. So when content is published to Syndicate, content can be tagged and classified to build out a faceted search experience, which is really helpful. And it's kind of a cool experience. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, the big power of Syndicate that I'm seeing that I think a lot of you might really be interested in, it's something that we'll talk about in a second, is this idea of APIs, headless content, and the shared integration. This allows users to connect their tools to Syndicate directly. So as an organization, you can create integrations, between Syndicate, maybe your own LMS, a learning experience platform, other business tools that you're using. When this kind of integration is set using APIs, you can pull data in and out of Syndicate for your own needs. Okay, you have the ability to transparently deliver your Flare content wherever you want, whenever you want. So this sort of big, powerful ball of APIs can be really helpful. And this idea of it being this headless warehouse for information might really help extend the reach of what you're doing on the tech doc side. So that's been really exciting. Also, some more advanced single sign-on support. So Syndicate supports multiple IDPs, so service provider initiated SSO, which is something that many of you might really be interested in, that we can certainly talk about. Some of that's going to tie into content governance as well. So really quite powerful and a bit more evolved on the single sign-on side that can really complement what you're doing in Central. Another thing that Syndicate can do once we get it over there, there's some content governance that can be automated. We can schedule the activation and deactivation of available content that becomes usable for our end users, so that published output. So for those of you that have content governance needs, maybe you have certain bits of information that need to be gated or non-gated based on one's role or permissions within an organization. That access in Syndicate can be controlled at the folder level, the document level, using group-based permissions. And we can automate the availability or unavailability of that information to support that governance. And if that's something that's important to you, it might be really beneficial because you can easily see, well, who did what? Did they access this? Did they complete this course? So there's a lot more visibility in terms of the analytics as well. And speaking of that, that's another thing we'll talk about. We can use analytics to track user interactions of our content. It has a built-in learning record store, or LRS, which Chris will kind of explain a little bit more. That might be really critical for an organization that requires governance on their content. Did this person access something? Did they complete this course? How are they scored?
Sorry, Jen, we're losing you. We lost you about 30 seconds ago.
Oh, okay. So I was talking about, hopefully I'm back. We're going to talk a little bit about the analytics built in and the learning record store capabilities. Plays a really important role for organizations that need to be mindful of the governance of that content. Was it experienced? Was it downloaded? Did they pass this course? And it can really complement what you're getting in Central to get a full picture of, is this content accessible? Is it findable? Is it helping? How can we make it better based on how end users search and use this content every day? So again, Syndicate does a lot more, but I sort of tried to boil it down to the things that I think might be really helpful for those of you using Flare or Flare and Central together. I'm going to quickly show you some mechanical things in Flare. I've already published some content over to Syndicate, and then we're going to take a look at that. And I'm going to ask my friend Chris to help us talk about all these fun things in a little bit more detail. So once again, I'm going to elegantly switch over to Flare as best I can here. So when we talk about publishing content to Syndicate, what it is, it's just an additional publishing destination, which is really easy. So think about in Flare, we're all about that write once, publish to many. If Syndicate is part of our technology stack, if we're using that, or if we're thinking about using it, if we're going to be getting it, it becomes an additional publishing destination for us. So we might have a publishing destination directly to Central to host things. We can also create this additional publishing destination directly to Xyleme Syndicate, just like I have here. So if this is something that we're going to be doing, all we need to do is create a new destination. We have an option directly to Syndicate. This is where you might be creating publishing destinations to other servers, other ecosystems, for example, Salesforce or Zendesk, for example. Perhaps you're publishing directly to a Git source control repo for output, lots of things. But we've added this new one here called Xyleme Syndicate. And then all you have to do is log in. Well, it logged me out, but that's okay. We'll just pretend here. You log into your instance of Syndicate, okay? And now you have to have an account to do that. And if anybody's thinking, well, how do I get that account? You'll talk to us and we'll help you out. But this is where we log into our instance of Syndicate. That's all you have to do. So there's my URL there. I have a folder that I created on Syndicate where I want things to go. And you have some other options here that you can fill in. Again, they're optional. You can always change them in the future. But it's really just as easy as creating a destination, logging in, and then clicking publish. So once that's set, of course, if we take a look at one of our, I'll take a look at one of these here. All we have to do is in our publishing tab of our target say yes. Remember, if you have additional destinations in your project, they're all going to show up here as a grid. All you have to do is tell Flare, yes, I want to send this target directly to Syndicate. Maybe you're sending it directly to Central. Maybe you're sending it to a different ecosystem altogether. That's fine. But this is where mechanically we send it directly to that instance. Once it's over there, what we see, and I'll show you what I published here. We'll go back. And I'm going to have Chris take over here in a minute, because being that we've just, moved in together here, he knows this very, very well. I'm just getting my feet wet here. But there's that folder I created with all of my content. These are 3 different targets that I've published here. So we can get into this a little bit, but just imagine we've taken our output and published it over here to Syndicate. Now we have access to it. The power of those APIs and shared integrations can take over. We can continue to update all of that information in Flare and do that single publish. And it's just going to syndicate and send our content wherever it needs to go. So I'm going to pause for just a moment. I'm hoping we have some, I haven't looked at the On24. We might have some questions in there. But Chris, welcome to the, welcome to our world here.
Jen. Yeah, it's an exciting merge.
Yeah, I'm going to have you, I'm going to kind of turn it over to you a little bit, because now that we've got it handed over to Syndicate, I think that's where the power of some of these shared integrations and APIs and taxonomies really come into play. So absolutely. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to have you direct me since I'm the one sharing my screen.
Certainly. So I'm happy to let you be the driver for this adventure. But the very first thing I want you to actually do is click up on the home button for me, right up there underneath where it says admin portal. And I kind of want to give a better understanding of what is Syndicate for our brand new users who've never heard of it. And this is a whole new idea for them to try to consume. And at its core, Jen really hit on this really well when she was first introducing this, is it's a warehouse where you can bring in all kinds of different finished goods. And we actually had a question somewhat related to this in the Q&A, where I can bring in and now publish directly into this from Flare. So I have my Flare projects in their many flavors. It doesn't care what kind of format it's coming in. So you could put in HTML, you could bring in a PDF, etc. But it's not limited to just Flare. In other words, I can manage and upload content in here from virtually any source. So on the Xyleme side, we also are able to author our own content. So of course I can publish from our create side of the house into Syndicate, but I could also bring in, maybe I made something in Articulate, or maybe I've got videos, or maybe I've got some other resources that I manage right alongside my Flare content and I want them side by side. I can do that in here. So when someone first comes in, we always start on the home page, and in here, it's designed to get me to where I want to go quickly. But kind of like what Jen did, up at the top now, we're going to leave the home tab where we can do our favorites, our updates, recent documents. And I want to jump directly to that documents tab, because at its center, it really is a folder-based library. And the nice part is now, and Jen kind of hinted at this, we help you manage access to the content permission-wise and privilege-wise. In other words, I could permission access to all these different folders and all their content by individual users or by groups. And we're multi-IDP supportive. So meaning I can have different sources of authentication coming in, and I can still manage that in one place, which is fantastic. It opens the door to a lot of flexibility. But Jen, let's get back to your folder, because I actually want to go open a single piece of content to talk about a couple things. So go ahead and click on the home button. Yep, and we've got yours favorited right up there at the top. And we've kind of hit one of what I like to call the big three, that idea of permissionable locations, multiple IDP, I can bring in other content. So it's that single place to go to manage my content. But the other one I really want to lean into is learning content. So Jen, if you could, let's see here. Have you got your XAPI one down there? I think you do. It's that third one on the list. Go ahead and open that one up for me. And when you open a piece of content, first of all, you get into the management side. So yes, if it can render a preview, it recognizes it'll do that. But click on that properties tab for me, right above where the render would come in. And there we go. Now, Jen was mentioning some of these automated features on the management side. You can see right there, we have scheduled activation, scheduled deactivation. So I can get content pre-published, but set it to not go live until a certain time. And if she goes all the way down the page, what you're going to see is we have a couple features in here for custom attributes and classifications down there at the bottom. What these allow you to do is add metadata. And that metadata has a lot of functionality built behind it. And part of what Jen was also mentioning in here on the management side is that searchability, that surfaceability of finding the content when and where you need it. So if I put custom attributes like string or date information or Boolean information on this, I can use that as facets when I'm searching. And then below that, the classifications, That's a full support of a taxonomy. So if you want to create a whole big custom-based taxonomy, tag your content, that also can help you find and surface your content, because that taxonomy can also become a facet. But this opens the door to some really cool stuff. So Jen, go ahead and scroll up the page for me. And up on the top right-hand corner, once you get up to the top, there's a share button amongst those buttons at the top. So you should see share. Go ahead and click on that one for me. And the reason I wanted you to start right here with the X APIs is because one of our major things in Xyleme is learning. And we lean into this. That's why we are a learning content management system, and Syndicate is a part of that system. Is we like to help you not just store and manage your content, but distribute it. Now, obviously, if you look at that second or that lower half of the page there, we've got shared links, we have shared thin packages, and shared integrations. All of these 3 different methodologies are about getting your content to where it needs to go seamlessly. That shared links, I'm really not going to spend much time on it because honestly, you're used to being able to generate links inside of Central, and it's a very similar functionality. But Jen, click on shared thin packages for me, because this is the part that gets really exciting over on, yep, right there. So the shared thin packages. I want you to go ahead and make one, and I'm going to talk about these. So basically hit that button, give it a name, and then go ahead and click create. So you can call it example or whatever you want to call it. But basically, you can spin up different points of connection for your learning content. Now, the big question is, what is a thin package? It's our answer to SCORM. So basically, if I produce SCORM or XAPI or one of those formats inside of Flare, I would have to download that project, and then I'd have to go put it inside my LMS. Or maybe I'm servicing 2 or 3 LMSs. Or maybe I also have my learning management systems, or I have a learning experience platform. So what this allows me to do with learning content is create points of connection. I build that connection one time with this thin package. My content doesn't have to go with it. It lives in Syndicate, meaning I stay in control. And when I update my content inside Syndicate, it sends that newer version for me into my learning management system, into my learning experience platform. In other words, it's pushing out the updates automatically. Wherever they are, how many ever I have, it doesn't matter. So I'm updating one time. I'm just republishing. And then I know that in my other systems down my workflow are getting that update automatically. In fact, to show you how it's doing this, Jen, thank you so much for bringing up that shared window. I'm going to have you click on that grayed out area behind it to go ahead and close it. And it'll take us just back to the main area, or you can hit the close button there. Perfect. Now, I'm going to have you switch back to your folder because there's another piece to this that I want people to see. So go ahead and on the breadcrumbs up there. Yep, perfect. And let's open up that second one, that help. Yep, the help one. Beautiful. Now in here, this is the other really exciting part about how Flare content behaves inside of Syndicate, and it's all about distribution. It's about those APIs. So yes, we have our preview. I have my properties where I can manage it, but there's 2 more tabs up here I want you to see. You can click on version for me, Jen. So inside of versions, every single time I publish, it's versioning that publication for me. What that means is it's keeping track of these older states in time. So let's say I have something I publish updates to very regularly, maybe once every 2 weeks, once a month, and it's 3 years later. Maybe HR comes in and says, hey, I saw that this was active 3 years ago. We're doing an audit. I need to know what was in that. Well, now I don't have to go digging back through all my source files. I literally can click on any one of those versions and pull up that piece of content at the point of need. So the system's managing and tracking your versions of your published content, but it's doing more than that too. So Jen, go ahead and click on those learning objects for me. And this is one of those major points of difference with Syndicate, is it doesn't just see your content as one locked package. It sees inside of it. So what you're looking at are all the different levels of topics of content inside that HTML package that Jen published out of Flare into Syndicate. And it does this natively. I can even click on one of those to open it up, take a preview of it, and even manage some of the properties to this. So it's not just dealing with a package and one link to that content. It's opening up the door for micro level delivery, because the entirety of Syndicate is built on our RESTful APIs. And let's connect some dots here. We already talked about the ways we can add metadata to this content. We can add the taxonomy. We can add the custom attributes. The APIs can read those. In other words, it can search across, the APIs can search across your library. The APIs can read into your content, and those APIs can now deliver parts and pieces of content depending upon how they were tagged out to virtually any endpoint you want it to go to. You want it in a knowledge portal? Okay, we can connect to one. You want it inside a learning management system? We can connect to one. You want to harvest just parts and pieces of something and render it in part of a website? We can connect to it. So it opens up the door, or like Jen says, it extends the reach of your content in incredibly dynamic ways. So to kind of sum up all the things we just looked at, I really like to look at it as a big three mentality. So number one, it's permissionable access to your content. Somebody can come in, there's a search bar at the top, they can search across the library, they can surface those with filters. And it's not just Flare content, it's that merging of your technical content right alongside your learning content. So one place. Second, it's the management and distribution of your learning content in really dynamic ways. It's able to reach into those endpoints like learning management systems and update for you. And third, it's those APIs. It's that visibility into the parts and pieces. It's the ability to treat your content in headless ways and deliver wherever it needs to go. And all of this is still being tracked in that LRS behind the scenes. So we're collecting XAPI statements every time your content is touched. It gets really exciting. Jen, that's about as in a nutshell as I can get it. Are there any other features or functionalities that you wanted me to go into?
No, I think, I think for our audience here, I really think the power lies in this sort of headless warehousing of things, and this whole idea of using, the door sort of opens with these APIs to make it so much more discoverable by other things. And so I really want to just stress how cool that is. I mean, if it's something that you need, we're not just sort of siloed in a static site anymore, or siloed in a static PDF. It really opens up the doors for more delivery.
Absolutely.
Which is really what I wanted to talk about. Yeah.
We love to talk about on the Xyleme side. One of the things we talk about related to this all the time is the ability to personalize your content, which for us means it's getting the right content in the right format, in the right time and place for the end user. And that might be, they hit a button like F1 inside their website or inside of a piece of software, and they need the exact right content in that moment that's relative to what they're doing. Or maybe it's about getting the learning content and the correct version inside your learning management system, inside that LMS, so that the learner doesn't have to wait 3 months for the update. It's all about making your content that much more reachable and that much more personalized for the people needing to consume it.
Yeah. But even if it's, I know you're talking a lot about learning content. I mean, this is, even if you're not doing quote learning content, there might be possibilities here for you to extend the reach with those flexible APIs that I think really just it's like extra eyeballs on the individual bits of your content to do some pretty amazing things with it. So I think that's going to be quite exciting. Yeah. So depending, if that's something that's interesting to any of you, just so you know, you're going to be getting a copy of this deck, and I think there's a link to this in the On24 platform. If you're wondering, is this for me? I have so many more questions. I don't know. I'm not sure. What does it mean? Get in touch with your CSM. Get in touch with your customer success manager over here on the Flare side. If you're not sure who that is, feel free to just schedule a time using the On24 link, or you can click this link here. It's not necessarily a demo. It's really scheduling a chat. We want to talk to you if you have questions like, well, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm struggling with. Could this be for me? We want to talk about it. We would like to dig into your needs a little bit and see if it might be something that could be interesting to consider in terms of your tech stack. Again, it's not going to necessarily replace what you have, but it's really going to complement what you're doing. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. But you have access to us if you have more questions about what this means for you, and should we even be thinking about this? So we want to hear from you. So please get in touch. We have a few minutes left.
I just highlighted that.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about, let me just pull up my web browser here so I can see. I'm going to try to do this once again as elegantly as possible. We have some questions here. Okay, let's just take a look. Oh, so great question. Is Syndicate a MadCap product offering, or does it come from a different vendor? It comes from us. So we are now one big happy team. So MadCap as sort of a solution, we have a kind of a solution for everybody coming in the door. We have Flare and Central for traditional technical documentation. We have Xyleme CMS for the enterprise content management, structured authoring and content management. And then we have Xyleme Syndicate to really help break down the silos between tech docs, e-learning, and of course, other things that we've talked about. But it's all under the MadCap umbrella. So all the same love and support you're used to from the MadCap side extends to you now with Xyleme. So it is one vendor, and we're here to help you depending on your needs. So it all comes from us. Okay, so a couple other questions I'm going to see if I can get to here.
One of the questions, Jen, if you don't mind me jumping in, they were asking
Sure,
about
please.
what the taxonomy looks like inside of Syndicate. And essentially, we built it to try to be as flexible as possible or as extensible as possible, meaning you can create as many starting points or as many starting trees as you need, and then they can have as many branches as you need to create essentially the system of taxonomy that you need to represent your learning, your skills, your content, your databases, whatever it is that you need to represent in the taxonomy, you have the flexibility to do that. Great question.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Another great question.
Question.
Yeah, it's another great question. Can Syndicate or Flare do the opposite and help bring external content into your project and outputs and allow them to be updated, managed externally?
Phenomenal question. You are able to bring in third-party content into Syndicate. It's honestly content agnostic. It doesn't really care the source. It doesn't care the format. And it's going to give you all the different management, distribution, and things that we just looked at together, which is really exciting because then you can bring everything into one place and manage it all from one source. But as far as I know it with the Flare side, it's not able to then push that back into Flare. You'd have to have something inside Central or something along those lines in order to do that. So Jen, on the Flare side, I'm going to hand this off to you because you are far more experienced in Flare than I.
on the Flare side, yeah, go on, Jen.
No, go, Dippo, please go ahead.
I sort of like, saw that question come up, and what I've been doing with some of the questions is I've been going into our help files and just putting a link directly into that. So you can import files from external projects, and while you're doing your import, you can also bind, create that sort of a link to that file, and that way, the next time you open Flare, you can ask it to check, or when you're about to build or publish, you can ask it to check if there are any updates in that source file, and then that would be pulled in. So it's basically linking and syncing to that source file. So let's say you've brought in FrameMaker, you've imported from FrameMaker, create that link, and anytime that FrameMaker file is updated, that content gets pulled into Flare as well. Am I right, Jen?
Yes, you can sync your content to the source file. So a couple questions came in about the update. This is sort of specific to those of you on Flare. Many of you asked this, so I'm just going to kind of tackle them all. Is this notion of like, okay, Flare 2024 came out. I'm not ready to fully go to that. I still have 2023 R2 on my machine. What do I do? Can I keep them both? How do I have both working at the same time? That question was asked a few different ways, so I'm just going to tackle it. 2024 is its own version, which means you can install it alongside any older version that you have. So if it feels more comfortable, if you're like in between things and you're not quite ready to spend some time getting everything to 2024, which is it's not difficult, but if you're doing anything with customizations, it's always nice to build your project in the new version just to make sure there aren't any weird things. Usually it's fine, but it's always good to check, particularly if you're midstream. You can install and activate Flare 2024 side by side any older version. So if you want to just have it on there and test things as you go, maybe make a copy of your old project, try building it in 2020, totally fine. 2024 is not going to install on top of an older version of Flare. So I want to make sure that was clear because that can be a little bit frightening when we're mid. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I put that in the I replied to that as well. But it's good for everyone to know that you can have like your dual installs. That way, you are able to test out, make sure that it does match with anything that you've done in particular to your projects. You want to test it out. Go right ahead and do that. And you can also just like request a demo for anyone else who is new to your company. I've got one particular question on here. I have a lot of writer comments, and it's basically linked to today's release.
Oh, I see this.
So
Yes.
I have a lot of writer comments in my topics that are marked with conditions. Is it possible to hide those writer comments from the SME?
Oh, good question. So there's kind of two things. If we so there's the idea of inserting an annotation in Flare to a paragraph or a list, for example, and you can insert a little annotation, like a little comment bubble off to the side in Flare, and that annotation shows up in Central as a little annotation. So if you, those are always going to show up. But if you have them marked, anything marked with a condition in Flare, if it's synced to Central, you should be able to, you won't be able to turn them off when you publish. In other words, what we can't do yet, operative word, what we can't do yet is say, hey, I'm going to send this topic for review and I want to exclude content marked with this condition before I send it. Can't do that yet. I hope in the near future. But what we can do is if that content is tagged with the conditional marker, when we see it in Central, we can say, hey, show me that a little bit easier visually that there is a color-coded condition tag applied to it. So we can't say, hey, exclude the content with the condition on it before it gets over there. But we can at least see it. So I don't know if I butchered that completely, but so that's a little bit different than the actual comments themselves. Any comment or annotation you add to a Flare topic will show up for the reviewer in Central's editor, particularly if they're reviewing things. It kind of shows up in the right-hand gutter over there. And they might add a comment back to you, and that's going to come back to you in Flare. Of course, you can see it in Central. So it's a good question. I hope that we'll be able to filter out content based on conditioned in the near future. I hope that's what you're asking for too.
Okay, we've come to the end of our time. I'll just quickly read out 30 seconds to quickly read out a couple of interesting ones that we've pretty much answered on here. So there was one that I spotted that was particularly interesting, and I've just I love that reviewers can now edit snippets within the topic. So that was an update that came in earlier on this year. So reviewers can also work on snippets and edit those. Was there, Chris, did you spot anything else on there? Jen, yep, go ahead.
There was actually one I wanted to clarify. This actually I think it came up when I was talking about editing in Central, and a couple people asked this, so I'll try to combine them together and tackle two here. Controlling access to projects in Central in a bit more granular level. So okay, so the question was specifically, can we lock down the project files so that authors editing in Central cannot make changes to any project files? Would that just be not allowing access to edit code in the permissions? So correct. So we can permission it a few ways. We can give authors access to a project so that they can, and that might be helpful if we're pushing and pulling from Flare, for example. But we can permission them so they can't edit files in Central. So something to be mindful of. So we can either we can permission authors on individual projects. So you might have a group of authors that are only can touch a specific project in Central and not at others. That you can do at the project level. Or if they're in a particular project, you can say, hey, you can push and pull from Flare, for example, but you can't edit files up in Central or edit code up in Central. So you can lock down their capability to do the authoring up there on a person-by-person basis and on a project-by-project basis. So I hope that answered the question, because it was asked kind of similarly in a couple different ways. Reach out to me if I can clarify any of that specifically on your content, but the permissioning, I think, is the answer here, and some of the granular permissioning that's available in Central per person.
And with most of the questions that we got in the Q&A, we managed to answer them in real time. And for any questions that we've not managed to get to, we will be writing an answer to those and then sending that out with the email link. Yes, Jen?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, I'm really grateful for everybody's time today, and I knew this was going to fly by and we'd go over. So I can't stress enough, if anybody's interested in looking at these in more detail, or if you're wondering, gosh, what is that thing in Central? I don't know about this, or what is this? I need more information on the Syndicate thing. I really would invite you to get in touch with us. We really want to talk to you about your needs and what you want to see. And if any of you have known me for some time, we love to talk to you about what you're doing. So I hope you're not shy. I hope you'll reach out to us and schedule some time to talk about some of these things, and see if it makes more sense, and of course dig into it deeper. We definitely want to get in touch with any and all of you who have some questions about it, to see, hey, is this thing for me? So that's what I wanted to say. So
feel free to click the request demo. That'll take you onto the page, and you can choose which product you want to demo on. And as Jen just said, it's not just a demo. We call it request demo, but it could be that you just want to have a chat and have questions answered, and that way you just book a time that's suitable for you and get in touch with us.
Yes.
Without further ado,
thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone, and really interesting questions. I see Chris is still answering some of them.
I'm trying to answer one real
those will be
those. Sign off.
Pardon?
I'm trying to answer one real quick.
Okay, I won't close it until you've submitted that one.
Yeah, and we're going to send out we're going to send out all the questions and answers to everybody, correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. Wonderful. Yeah, well, we so appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much. Please get in touch. I'd love to get your feedback on some of these new features in 2024. Curious if anybody's interested on that reduce flicker. I know that was like one little small thing, but I think it's kind of cool. I'm really interested to see if it helps anybody from a user experience perspective.
There were a couple of questions on Gen AI as well, and how AI Assist is working and what updates are coming up. And so
yes.
There's loads that you mentioned it during, there's loads of stuff that we've got planned on there. I've also actually got a webinar on the productive uses of AI in technical communications. And that'll be on the 5th of June. I go onto the MadCap Software website, onto the webinars page, and you'll be able to sign up for that. And come and take a look at some of what, and by that time would have revealed a few more AI features, I think.
Yeah, there's so much possibility there, and like I said, we just recently dipped our toe into it. I think that's going to come fast and furiously in our worlds, of course. And so that first iteration of it was to integrate the AI within Central's authoring capabilities, and it's really nice to have it there, and we don't have to switch between browsers, and we can insert and reformat and reprompt right there. It's kind of fun, but I suspect we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, and you're able to take advantage of anything new that comes onto the OpenAI platform. You're able to quickly start taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and so right now, Central supports 3.5 and 4 of the OpenAI platform of ChatGPT. But like I said, because we're integrating with that, I mean, you're going to see, I think in the near future, some some new things. As that continues to evolve, Central's going to continue to evolve as well, including the blending of the AI. So I think we're going to see a lot in the next few months here related to that. Like I said, we just dipped our toe in and just got started.
Yeah.
And a lot of things happening behind the scenes there.
There was a question related to RAG and AI, and just keep your eye on this page, and you'll be seeing some really interesting stuff coming up.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm going to close this out now. We're over time, and people are starting to drop off. Thank you very much for all of you who've stayed on to hear us ramble a little bit more. We've tried to answer as many questions as possible. And look forward to seeing you again at our next webinar. Keep an eye on the webinars page, on our resources pages, and just keep abreast of what's going on, where we're going to be appearing at, where we're doing webinars. And for any new releases, you'll be sure to hear from us about whatever events we're going to set up for those. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Chris.
Thank you,
You're
everybody.
welcome.
So good to connect with everybody. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Talk to you all soon. Take care.